Hello, Texas, and welcome to a candid conversation about what powers modern life. If you're looking for facts about our energy landscape and how oil and natural gas provides energy security for our state, nation, and allies around the globe, you've come to the right place. This is TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight. Welcome back to TXOGA Talks, a podcast brought to you by the Texas Oil and Gas Association, or known by the acronym TXOGA. I'm Todd Staples, your host, and I serve as president of TXOGA. And today I really want to talk to you about something that's the most fundamental thing to being an American. It's the right to vote. It is not only a right, but it's a responsibility. And it is something that's very precious. And I'm telling you that the right to vote in America doesn't mean the same thing as it does in other countries. It doesn't mean the same thing in Venezuela. It doesn't mean the same thing in Cuba. It's a right that we must protect. And the only way to protect it is to exercise that right. And so we've got a big election coming up. And today we have someone very special that's here to speak with us about that, the Honorable Dennis Bonnen, the 75th Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives. Dennis, you served, I think, about 24 years or so, right? Representing House District 25. After retiring from the legislature, Speaker Bonnen co-founded a consulting firm to share his extensive legislative experience in the private, with the private sector. And Dennis, and you think about voting, you've been through a lot of cycles. Yes. Is there anything that I overstated about the right to vote here this morning?
No, I'm going to hit it hard right here from the beginning. In my very first race, there were 4 decent people running in a Republican primary. I made the runoff by a whopping 9 votes. So 5 votes shifted.
Wow.
I'm not there. And you just pointed out, I finished as Speaker of the House. I was Texas House member for 24 years. So those 5 votes decided the next 24 years in that district, and it made a real impact in this building too, because if it had been anyone else, who knows how that would have gone. But every vote makes a difference. It sure did in my life.
Wow, 5 votes. Well, folks, we're primarily focus our comments about the oil and natural gas industry, as TXOGA represents the producers who produce 90% of our state's crude oil and natural gas, operate a vast majority of our state's pipelines, our refineries, our LNG facilities, our service companies. And we're talking to you today. We're talking to you about protecting your jobs, protecting the ability to provide for your families. There's a lot of misinformation about oil and gas today. There are some that are so misguided, they think that we can do without the very commodities that really power our power here in the Lone Star State. So we've got big elections coming up, Speaker Bonnen, and I wanted to start out by listing some key dates for our primary election cycle. And I want you in just a minute just to talk to us a little bit about primaries and what that means. Is it the same way all over the country, all over the world? But before I do, folks, I want you to get your pencils out or get your phones, and I want to just highlight some key dates that I think you need to be aware of. So in February 17th begins the first day of early voting, and you can early vote through February 27th. Now, there might be some weekend days. I don't know. You'll have to look at your local registrar to find that out. But February 17th to February 27th is early voting. Election day, the big game day, is Tuesday, March the 3rd, and that's from 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 in the evening. And then if you are voting by mail, the last time to get that in is February 20th. So, Speaker Bonnen, we talk about a primary election cycle, which is what's going on March the 3rd, and the general election cycle, which is different. And I watched the Super Bowl. So when I think about that, you've got 2 conferences, the American Conference and the National Conference, that they choose which teams get to play in the Super Bowl. That's kind of like the primary system in the general election system. Explain how that works to us.
100%. So each party has their primary in March, Democrat, Republican. And the reality of it is that is overwhelmingly where these races are going to be decided. Mm-hmm. So I hope this story isn't offensive to your viewers. In my first race in 1996, so in the Republican primary, there were 4 candidates. You have round 1 on March the 3rd, and then you'll have the runoff, which will be on May 26th. So if I didn't get, which I did not, 50% of the vote, plus 1. So in that primary, both parties, if you don't get 50% plus 1, you go to what's called the runoff. Now, the gentleman who was an elder statesman that I replaced in the House when I won the runoff, and here's where these March 3rd votes matter, and then that May 26th runoff matters. He told me, he said, Dennis, you could run naked through the streets of Pearland and you're still going to win in November. I didn't test it, but he was right. Yes, thank goodness. Probably would have lost. But the reality of it is, these March primaries in both parties make the total difference. There are very few races anymore that are decided in November. Now, November matters, but let me tell you, people look past these primaries. I would knock on a guy's door and he'd say, well, I'm a Republican. I'd say, great. And he says, yeah, I'm going to go vote. And I said, great. And then I'd go back in my runoff.
Yeah.
They had not voted. They had not voted. And think about it. A 24-year decision got made in that runoff.
With 5 votes, swing votes.
Swing votes to get there. And so that's the difference in that primary. So March 3rd is your primary election date. You've got your early voting. If you don't get 50%, you go to a 2-person runoff, and that will decide it all.
So some people in Texas, they recognize themselves as Republicans, some as Democrats, some as independents. Is there a prerequisite in voting in either primary? So if you're just listening today and you think, I might want to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic, how does that work? Do you have to be registered to vote in a primary?
You do not, which is wonderful. So the reality of it is, and really where that I think makes the most difference is on a local race. Whether you're worried about your county judge or a district judge or a justice of the peace, excuse me. So you can show up. When you show up to vote, they will ask you, do you want to vote in the Republican primary or do you want to vote in the Democrat primary? Now, once you make that vote designation in that cycle, the runoff we talked about that can happen if no one gets 50%, you can then only go back to the primary you voted in that runoff. But it only lasts for that one cycle. So you don't have to designate yourself as one or the other until you show up in March to cast that ballot. And then when you do that, if you go back, which you should for the runoff, you got to stick with the party you picked. And people decide that on local races more than anything.
Yeah, that's true. But you can't vote in the Republican primary on some races and the Democrat on others.
No.
You have to pick a path.
That's right.
Stick with it for this cycle.
For March.
And then the next cycle, it's
a full
game.
ballot.
It's fair game in the November general election. You vote for who you want to.
100%.
Yeah. Now we also have third-party candidates. We've got Libertarians, Green Party. Will those people have a primary?
Yes. Well, no, they don't have a primary. They just they have their own nominating process. And so you will see them pop up on the November ballots, but you will not see them in a primary election.
But you don't worry about that.
You don't worry about that at all.
You need to decide if you're voting in Republican primary or Democratic primary, and then go vote on March the 3rd or before, which is very important. Now, some people, I hope everyone listening votes, 4 times a year. I really do. But get it. There's some people that get busy. They're raising a family. They're working. Is it hard when you go vote? What is required? What's necessary when you show up so that those of you listening can understand this process?
Well, and actually what it is, and it's incredibly easy, but more importantly, it also creates integrity to the election. And it's as simple as, it's called voter ID. All you need is a Texas state driver's license. And if you don't have a Texas state driver's license issued by DPS, you can get an election identification certificate issued by DPS. You can take a personal identification card, again, issued by DPS. You can take a Texas license to carry handgun license.
I've used that one time. It surprised the clerk, but I did.
You can do that. And it worked.
It did.
It did. And then a U.S. military ID card. So we respect the military greatly. And then a U.S. citizen certificate with a personal photo, and then a U.S. passport.
Okay.
So really, there are numerous ways to do it, but it's real simple. They just want an ID to show it. And I'd been using an ID for years, because what people forget is you can't find that voter card some of the time.
Yeah.
And so now all you got to do is show up with your ID. That's it.
So there's no voter card. There's nothing you need. Just show up, and you can find the place to vote. And we'll talk to you a little bit about that as well. The last time I looked in the 2024 election cycle, there were over 18 million registered voters in Texas. So, folks, we've got about 31 million Texans right now. We've got about 18.5, 18.6, 18.7, maybe 19 million now. Who knows? So, just barely over half the Texans are even registered to vote. You talked about 5 people voting the other way could have really changed the outcome of your election. My guess is there's a small percentage of people that really turn out. Is that what your experience teaches?
100%. So we're in what's called a midterm or an off-year election, meaning not presidential year. And so the percent of the vote is way down in the midterms. And this, even though it's the primary, it is a midterm primary. What that means, though, is your vote matters that much more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mistake people make.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I'll tell you kind of a funny story. I knocked on a guy's door, and he looks at me and says, "You don't seem like I was young." He says, "You don't seem like a bad kid. I think I might vote for you this time, but I won't vote for you again." And I said, "Why not?" And he says, "I don't vote for incumbents." I walked away from that door thinking, great, because once I get there, you're not taking me out.
And
the reality is,
most of the time,
voting in a primary and an off year, your vote is worth exponentially more because you have a greater impact, because unfortunately fewer of your friends and neighbors are showing up to the ballot box. And so that is, in my opinion, that is voting power amplified for those of us who show up.
Well, to prove your point, an analysis was done that looked at congressional races in 2024, and the data that they provided said 87% of congressional races, folks, were decided in the primary, meaning that just 7% of the voters who participated in these elections effectively chose the vast majority of the United States House of Representatives.
Yeah. I mean, that's power, folks.
It is.
I mean, that is power in the ballot box. And, you know, it's also discouraging to some extent, because what it's telling you is very few people are making this choice, making this decision. And so it means all of you listening to this, and I mean this sincerely, if you're taking the time to listen to Todd and Dennis today, my gosh, why wouldn't you take the time to go vote?
Right.
I mean, really. And so think about that. You could be one of the 7%, which hopefully we could drive to 10, 15, 20%. But the reality of it is, it makes your voice matter, because not enough people are getting out there, and we're here for TXOGA. Oil and gas, believe it or not, is not as well represented as you would think it is. And the way you can change that is by making sure you're part of the 7, or you're pushing it to 8 or 9%. And the more in the industry casting that vote for candidates that they know are pro oil and gas in Texas, the more power you have for your industry. It protects your jobs. It protects your investments. It's the right thing.
And what we're hoping to accomplish today, for those of you listening, is that you're the messenger and go out and recruit fellow coworkers and family members who aren't listening and encourage them to vote as well. And we're going to tell you how to do that when we come back from our break. But right now, we're going to take a short recess here so you can hear from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Neil Carlton, president of the TXOGA Insurance Agency. The TXOGA Insurance Agency is pleased to sponsor today's episode of the TXOGA Talks podcast. TXOGA members have access to the TXOGA Safety Group with Texas Mutual and get a premium discount of 12.4%, as well as the possibility to earn 2 dividends. Participants also have access to unique safety tools to keep their team safe and on the job. Visit TXOGAinsurance.gov for more information.
Welcome back to this episode of TXOGA Talks. I'm TXOGA President Todd Staples, joined by former Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives, longtime friend Dennis Bonnen, and we're breaking down the Texas upcoming primary election cycle. And the real message that we're delivering today is that if you care about Texas, if you care about America, if you want to make certain that your children have an opportunity to enjoy the blessings that you have, then you're going to want to go vote, and you're going to go recruit others to vote as well, and go to the polling booth informed. And Dennis, there's a ton of races this cycle that is normally not this many choices to make. There are tons of candidates, and so it's going to take a little extra work to find out who to vote for and how to vote this cycle.
Well, and this is a cycle where we've talked about turnout being lower. This is a cycle where huge impacts are going to be made. I mean, real decisions are being made by those who choose to show up and vote. You've got the governor's race at the top of the ticket. Governor Abbott's running for re-election, and you may be shocked. There are 11 candidates in the Republican primary for governor. Now, I don't want to make any bold predictions here today, but I think Governor Abbott will win that primary. But then you have a race. There are 10 Democrat candidates running for governor. And so There's a decision to be made. I think less of a impactful situation there. Lieutenant governor, you've got Dan Patrick, he's the incumbent, running for election, but there are 3 other candidates. You've got the Democrats have 3 candidates running for lieutenant governor. But here's a huge race. What was Governor Greg Abbott before governor?
He's Attorney General.
Jackpot. You know what's wide open right now? The Attorney General of Texas. So,
And it hasn't been for
a very long time. So let's be clear. One, the Attorney General position in and of itself is incredibly powerful and incredibly important.
Yes.
But it is also a position that can get you to governor of the state of Texas, which is also obviously important. So in that Attorney General race, you've got 4 candidates. You've got 3 that are spending a lot of money. They're all pretty well qualified. You've got a choice to make there. And that choice, by the way, could impact the next 10 to 20 years of Texas as to who wins that Attorney General race, with 4 candidates in the Republican primary and 3 in the Democratic primary. So that's a huge race. And then you've got the comptroller race, which is a huge race. It's a race where you have 4 people running in the Republican primary, 3 people running in the Democratic primary. Again, comptroller has a huge impact on the oil and gas industry, tax issues that affects every one of your companies, which in turn affects jobs and affects investment. So that comptroller race, and again, that's a position, again, that is very important to the industry, but is also a position that the comptroller becomes lieutenant governor some of the time. They become governor sometimes. So the position itself is powerful and important, but they move up that ladder once they get into those roles. And then you have the land commissioner. You have the incumbent running there in the Republican side, 2 Democrats running for that one. Not as hot a race. Ag commissioner, you have the incumbent running, and he's got a heck of a challenge going on for him in that race. So ag commissioner, which you know a little bit about, having been the ag commissioner and being very, very competent at that. So you've got an ag commission race that's huge going on right now. And it's a powerful position. It's probably the most vulnerable the incumbent's been in a very long time in that race on the Republican side. And then railroad commission, you've got 5 people running for a railroad commission seat. And most of y'all probably can't name all 5, much less one of the 5. So go learn the candidates in that road commission race, because last time I checked, don't they help regulate the industry?
They do as well, for sure. And there's 3 different railroad commissioners, and so there's a different commissioner that's up every 2 years, and makes it a very important race for sure.
And then let's not look past United States Senator. You've got a United States Senate race in the Republican primary and in the Democrat primary. And it is one of the hottest races in both primaries in the United States of America here in Texas. And that race is huge. Who represents you in the U.S. Senate makes a difference. And I won't go into the candidates and prejudice anybody, but they're who the Democrats believe wins, they think can have an impact on their viability to win for the first time in a statewide race and forever in Texas, and who the Republicans believe win has a big viability and who can win in November. And so this U.S. Senate race is really significant. And more importantly, they're real choices. They're real choices in the Republican primary, and they're real choices in that Democrat primary. And oh, by the way, most people get elected to the United States Senate. They stay, 5 minutes or 18 years. Right. Reality is it's about 12 or 18 years someone will go sit in that U.S. Senate race. And so you think this doesn't make a difference? It makes a difference. And with lower turnout, your vote matters even more.
Your vote really does matter. That's what we're trying to emphasize here today. Speaker Bonnen has already talked about some very important races that will impact your lives, your future, the amount of taxes you pay on your homes, the kind of roads you drive on, because all these decisions are made by these policymakers, including our United States federal policy in the United States Senate seat. But not to overload you, folks, there are other races besides these that we mentioned that we won't and can't possibly get into today. But there's State Board of Education races, right?
So you got State Board of Education, you've got Supreme Court, you've got 4 members of the state Supreme Court are up. Now,
you've got Court of Criminal Appeals, which is different than our state Supreme Court,
correct,
and which in Texas you have the right to vote on. Today, that may change in the future, but today it works like that.
100%. And look, I want to point this out. I've had friends come to me and say, I may not vote because I don't know all the races and all the candidates. That is a terrible reason to not go vote.
Right.
One, if you can, take a little time to learn them. It's what we're encouraging y'all to do. Encourage your friends and neighbors. You can give them advice on who to vote for, but here's something that, maybe not super popular, but look, go vote. And if you don't have a clue who the people on that race is, skip it. I'd rather you skip a race than skip an election.
There you go. That's good. That's right. That's a very good point. You might have, depending on where you live, a very long ballot because you're going to be voting on your county judge, your commissioner's court, potentially county treasurers, justice of the peace, all those types of things. But the good news here is there are links to websites that you can go to that will give you a preview of the ballot, and we'll give you a couple of links here today that you can look at to help give some information. There are tons, actually, if you care to look. There's more information than you can probably have time to go through. But there's one simple place that you can look at, Dennis. If you want to know if you're a registered voter or not, where do you go to look at to find that out?
VoteTexas.gov. All you gotta do is go to VoteTexas.gov, and you can see the whole ballot in your community and know exactly who you would. And by the way, this is really important to point out. You can print that ballot out and take that into the polling place with you.
That's right.
So my wife and I will print the ballot out. We'll go through it together, and she'll tell me who I'm supposed to vote for, and I mark it down appropriately. And then I take that into the polling place because I have taken my homework in, and they allow you to do that. So you can take that sample ballot that you have marked up at home straight into the polling place. So you can cast your vote at home. Basically, you just got to show up.
Well, and you just made a very important point. If a guy like you that it really pays close attention to politics, myself, I print those ballots out and I look at them because I don't know everybody on that list.
No.
There's just no way to in some of those things. So those of you listening today, don't feel badly about not knowing everyone. Speaker Bonnen made a great point. Vote for the people that you know about and inform yourself to the best extent you can, and you can take that into the polling booth with you.
I've walked in the ballot box. I've been going down my ballot, and I have felt horror and embarrassment because I've gotten to a race and I've gone, I didn't even realize this was going to be here.
Right. Yep. Me too.
So it happens to everybody, but I tell you what, I'd sure rather be in that ballot box, letting my voice be heard, skipping a race I know nothing of, or picking one. I mean, people do that.
That's right.
Than not having my voice be heard at all.
VoteTexas.gov. VoteTexas.gov is the Texas Secretary of State's website that you can take a look at. There are a couple of other sites I'll just share with you today. TXOGA PAC is the TXOGAPAC.org. TXOGAPAC.org is the website for the Texas Oil and Gas Association Good Government Committee. It's a separate standalone entity that does make some recommendations in some races, not all, but you can go take a look at that. And we do vote on our judges in Texas, and there's a site that I've found, tcjlpac.org. That's a pretty useful site as well because they dig in and interview judges and will give some recommendations. If you care to go look at those two sites, those are good ones to look at.
Well, I sure hope you would look at the TXOGA PAC site. I would hope you look at that. And then the other one, the TCJL PAC, that's a good one for the simple fact that those are a lot of lawyers and legal experts that they're not looking at it from a purely political perspective. They're looking at that from a who's experienced, who's proven to be a respected lawyer, and those who are in the judicial system as a judge today, who's done a good job as a judge. And let me be clear, we don't want to find ourselves in a courtroom, but in the oil and gas business, you're going to find your company or somebody's going to find an impact from that judicial system. So those judges matter. They matter.
All of this matters, folks. It's America's 250th birthday this year of the founding of our country. Some thought it wouldn't last very long. I've been to other countries all across the globe, and what we have here is very special, but it can only be preserved if you're exercising your right to vote. The good news is you don't need an excuse to vote early. You can just go, take your lunch break, go on the way to work, on the way home. February 17th through the 27th, early voting. I like to get mine in as early as I can. Election day is March 3rd. Folks, if you're in the oil and gas business, if you care about the oil and gas business, and you should, no matter if you work in the oil and gas business or not, because it pays for your roads, it pays for our universities, it pays for our public education. This industry paid $27 billion last year on state and local taxes and state royalties alone, not counting all the other things that it paid for. And so we hope that you'll go vote, be pro-energy, obviously, pro-oil and gas, pro-business. I think it's what brings jobs to Texas and gives us all an opportunity to live above our raising. My dad's baby bed was a shoebox. No kidding.
Right.
I mean, and because we live in America, because we can elect our elected officials, we can vote for them, you can make a difference. Speaker Bonnen, thanks for joining us today. And we'll wrap up with thanks for listening. Go vote. And we appreciate you listening to another episode of TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight.
The views expressed on this podcast are not intended and should not be construed to be the views of any particular TXOGA member or company. The purpose of this podcast is to engage in candid conversations about energy needs, energy security, and the future of energy.